Happy Tuesday here on Golic and Golic, unless you're a Knicks fans. The Pistons got Spike Lee to fly all the way to Detroit to watch the Knicks get their asses kicked. This Pistons team, young and upstart, showing us even more why they deserve their place at the top of the East. Meanwhile, from the people who brought you high school recruiting clips comes the Portal Edition. Kenny Minchey's move from Nebraska to Kentucky reignites some of those old familiar feelings as portal season rages on. And bear down, Tommy Lloyd going to join us to talk about the undefeated Wildcat start to the season, their freshman sensation, Koa Pete, and where to find the best eats in Tucson. That's one of the more underrated food cities in the country. Maybe that's just my personal opinion. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. here with you guys on a busy day. We've got plenty of NFL coaching news to get to. Ted Nguyen from The Athletic going to join us to talk about some of the moves and shakes around the league. We've got more of the portal news as mentioned, but last night felt a little different for everybody sitting at home, maybe, especially if you're of the football watching variety. The first day without Monday Night Football since back on August 25th. There did feel like a void in my day. I wasn't sure what to do with my hands. What did you do with all the newfound free time coming back off getting the sleep following your flight after Sunday Night Football?
Yeah, I mean, we normally are doing a preview show for the Monday night game for Westwood One after this show, and we're busy as heck on Mondays. I found myself kind of twiddling my thumbs a little bit until your mother and I sat down and watched the Andy Griffith show. I mean, you got to love that show, okay, because it leads right into Everybody Loves Raymond. So those are the reruns.
So that's why you love that show.
Yeah, but Andy Griffith, listen, there's something about the simple life in Mayberry, right? Where Andy's the sheriff, Barney Fife is the deputy. It's just simple living. Like last night's episode, 1945 high school reunion for them. They went back to it. Andy saw his old flame there, and they wondered why it never worked out. It's because she went off to the big city, Chicago, and he wanted to stay in Mayberry, the small town, and live his life. So just good old-fashioned living is what it was. So that's what I watched.
That sounds like a reverse Hallmark movie, basically, where the guy is usually it is the guy that stays home in the small town, and then the big city woman ends up coming back and realizing the one that was right for her was there all along under her nose. I take it that didn't work out for Andy.
No, they ended up getting in a little bit of a tiff over that. You know, he expected her to move back to Mayberry, and she's like, no, I want to challenge myself in the big city. You know, and he's like, whoa, it's great here in Mayberry. And then they realized they just had to follow different paths in life. And normally the Andy Griffith show ends with a meaningful message and all smiles everywhere. So that's what I watched because, listen, there was absolutely no sports on last night, was there?
Tongue fully in cheek.
Yes.
We can get to the sports that most of you are probably watching in the NBA, but for the college football sickos like me and people who just like good old-fashioned entertainment, the FCS National Championship last night was insane. Illinois State and Montana State played an absolute barn burner. Illinois State was down 14-28 going into the fourth quarter, battled all the way back, an incredible touchdown here to tie the game at 28. Then they get the opportunity to actually drive down and kick a go-ahead field goal with just over a minute left, and after a bad snap, blocked, return the other way. Montana State gets sacked and then snaps the ball over the quarterback's head, so overtime is where we go. Illinois State strikes first. They score the touchdown here, another incredible play, but their seventh blocked kick of the season on the extra point in overtime. Fun fact, that flag doesn't mean anything on that play. And so 4th and 10, Montana State, the touchdown pass to Taco Dowler, who had a monster game for them, gives them their first national championship since 1984. This was an insanely chaotic game. I already mentioned, Dad, that Illinois State over the course of this season had 7 kicks blocked, including 2 of the most important ones of their season in this game. But Montana State, not to be outdone, had, and I'm not making this number up, 9 false start calls on their offense over the course of this game, including a botched snap, as I mentioned, on that last drive where they're in field goal range. The center snaps it right past the quarterback who's not expecting it, and they're on the other side of the 50 and have to punt. It was chaotic, sloppy, beautiful football. I felt like I needed a cigarette after.
Yeah, congrats to Montana State, though. Again, 35-34 in overtime, their first title since 1984. Illinois State was looking for their first title, but it seemed like a game that ended on more mistakes, or like you said, 9 false start penalties. That is unheard of.
Impossible. Shades of, and a game I know you and my mom will remember trying to console me after, Notre Dame Stanford 2011, where Mike Golic Jr. was a part of 3 different snap infractions in the first quarter that led to me almost wanting to drive off a cliff after that game.
That was Jim Harbaugh getting you. He was the coach of Stanford then, and you would look between your legs and then snap your head up kind of fast, something you'd been doing all year, and Harbaugh got in the ref's ears before the game and said, "Hey, watch that center." After he looks between his legs, he brings his head up a little fast. That's a false start. And you know what? The refs agreed with him.
I will have my revenge on Jim Harbaugh in this life or the next. Rest assured, due to the mental toll that he caused me there. But again, it was nightmare fuel. Congrats to Montana State
after that.
I was. Someone wrapped their arms around the long snapper for Illinois State too. Feel bad for that guy. Honestly, the coach also 4th and 1 plus territory, a chance to win the game on your terms might be one they want back. But either way, an incredibly compelling game on a night where, to your point, we didn't have Monday Night Football, but we have plenty of entertaining stuff. I won't pretend like I've watched a ton of Detroit Pistons basketball so far this season. Cover college football. It's busy. Football's our bread and butter around here. But last night, we had the Pistons and the Knicks, a rematch of an awesome playoff series, 6-game series from last year where the Pistons won their first playoff game in like 20 years. They decided to make it a lot less fun and beat the absolute heck out of the Knicks, 121-90 in Detroit. Watching this game and this team, Cade Cunningham, an incredibly efficient night from him. We had talked about the defensive effort. They're one of the best teams in the league on defense in terms of defensive rating. They play, Dad, at an entirely different speed. As someone who you always talked about growing up, things like rebounding defense are so much more effort than they are anything else, even if you do give some acknowledgement to the scheming. These guys, it matters so much to them. We always say every blade of grass, every square inch of space on that floor was personal to the Pistons last night. And you saw after a very shell-shocked, very embarrassed Mike Brown, Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, who realized they got bullied. The thing that was supposedly the Knicks game, they got completely outdone on in this one. It was a magnificent night for the Pistons.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, this is a game where Detroit had a 10-point lead at halftime, stretched it to, I believe, a 20-point lead going into the fourth quarter. And Cade Cunningham was his usual self, 29 points, 13 assists. Everybody looking at every time these two teams match up as the possible Eastern Conference championship. And listen, what the Knicks can just say is, it was a regular season game. It's not the playoffs. So they can always justify a loss like this. But everybody was expecting a lot better of a game, obviously.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they just brushed this off either, Dad. Jalen Brunson was pretty cryptic after this game, saying a lot needs to be done, but we'll keep it internal. Mike Brown said it's pretty simple. They just physically kicked our ass. And you talk about this all the time, when it's being a defensive player getting run on or what have you, like, there's nothing that hurts worse than when a team goes out there and just challenges your manhood the way the Pistons 100. And to their credit, the Pistons shot better than usual last night. They're not a team that's been necessarily prolific or consistent from three. But when you've got the superstar that continues to play the way Cade Cunningham has, first half MVP right now, and a defense like that, my concern for them becomes, and I wonder if this sounds familiar to you, can you maintain that level of intensity over the course of an entire season and over the course of multiple 7-game series? Because that's a difficult style of basketball to hang your hat on and try and replicate in those circumstances, as the New York Knicks have found out over the course of the Tom Thibodeau era.
Yeah, much like, can you be on a hot shooting streak for a series in the playoffs? Can you play just high intensity physical basketball? But I think there's a more chance of Detroit doing that than a team getting hot and shooting in a 7-game series against them. And plus, remember, we'll also see they have their own first-round picks for the next 7 years. Will they make a trade by the deadline? But right now, they are the most physical and defensive team that's in the NBA. They play some tough ball, and you're right. When you're getting manhandled physically, now basketball is not the physical sport football is, but it's still physical enough, and when you're getting handled physically.
These guys played basketball like a football team, and I say that complimentary given the physical nature of it. So Pistons, hey, at least one person in the national media sees and feels you after what you put on performance last night here. So we'll have plenty more time to talk about the greatness of the Pistons, I have a feeling, this season. Let's talk about more of the changes that we've seen in the NFL, though. In the meantime, the NFC East is going to watch the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles go and defend their NFC East crown as the first team to win that division back-to-back years since God knows when, and now go on there while everyone else tries to sort through the wreckage. And we had multiple moves made today on that front. Matt Eberflus, the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, fired by that team in a move that seemed widely expected as he goes one and done following his tenure with the Chicago Bears that gave way to Ben Johnson up there. And then elsewhere in the NFC East, the Washington Commanders made multiple moves here. Cliff Kingsbury and the Commanders reportedly mutually agree to part ways as Cliff going to pursue other opportunities. He's already someone that I think's been reached out to and interviewed for multiple head coaching vacancies around the NFL. The Commanders also part ways with Joe Witt, their defensive coordinator, which was another move expected this year. The head coach taking over defensive play calling once again in the way that happened there, kind of a canary in the coal mine. Dallas, we expect this. Dead for Washington, a year removed from an NFC Championship appearance, with a young quarterback in Jaden Daniels that seemed to jive well with Cliff Kingsbury. How stunning is this move?
Yeah, that's a little bit surprising, obviously, but Jaden Daniels was injured. Terry McLaurin was injured some this year. You thought that everybody might get a pass for it. But, Cliff Kingsbury, like you mentioned, is he going to get looked at for other jobs, head coaching jobs, which, listen, anybody can hire who they want to hire, but I'm a little surprised. I was surprised when the Arizona Cardinals hired him out of college. He was the head coach at Texas Tech for 6 years, won 35-40 overall, 19-35 in the Big 12. Finished, the best he finished was fifth in the conference in college, tied for fifth. 4 years at Arizona, 28-37 there, only one winning season. I would personally take a chance on a new coordinator getting a first-time head coaching job than Cliff Kingsbury. Now, again, teams can hire who they want, but it did seem to work well with Cliff and Jaden Daniels his rookie year. So it is surprising. And as you mentioned, Dan Quinn took over for Joe Witt, calling defensive plays. So you saw that one coming a little more. But, yeah, now Jaden Daniels is going to have a different offense to learn in his third year.
Yeah, it's going to be curious how that moves Racine. Saw some early reporting, I think, from Jordan Schultz that, Jaden Daniels, one of a few players there, a little stunned by this move because it's one thing to say, hey, Cliff might have been in line in a year where there's no Ben Johnson level candidate to go out here and snag one of these jobs because he's got prior experience in that. How recent you may also bring up. I saw this note from Grant Paulson so recently that the Cardinals' dad are still paying him for one more season. The Commanders will now be paying him as well, so whoever he signs with will be one of three teams currently funding Cliff Kingsbury's lifestyle. That guy could have stayed on the beach in Tahiti. Like, remember that? He was hanging out on the beach, and he decided to come back here. Cliff Kingsbury, all the respect in the world, but brother, you and I are not the same. My ass would still be on that beach drawing one paycheck. Apparently, that's why you're a hero at the bank, because you managed to pull this off.
I mean, this is just an extension of Roger Goodell sending a memo to the owners a couple of years ago saying, hey, gang, slow down on firing coaches because you're paying multiple coaches. I believe Mark Davis in Vegas is paying like multiple coaches like $50 million a year to not coach the Raiders and add Pete Carroll to that. Now he's got 2 more years on his deal. So, hey, it's the owners. They're playing with like Monopoly money out there, giving it away. I'd like to be the recipient of some of that.
Well, I mean, look at Matt Eberflus, who kind of is the beneficiary and also the one being ruined by that, where in Dallas, all the decisions made about defensive personnel had nothing to do with Matt Eberflus. The guy shows up there this year, and what do they do right before the season? trade his world-beating best player on defense in Micah Parsons, and then say, go figure it out. And we see towards the end of the year, right, the release of Trevon Diggs in the secondary that might be emblematic of another failed foray into paying him big money in the back end of that defense, a group that couldn't stop anything all year long, and Matt Eberflus certainly has to wear some of that. But I also do think there's got to be an acknowledgement that, kind of like what we talked about for a team like the Cincinnati Bengals with Al Golden, where you're trying to squint to see improvement, where you recognize that, hey, by and large, there weren't a lot of things to get excited about. Some young players like Damarian Overshawn that you talked about. Some older players like we saw towards the end with guys that they brought in free agency. Kenny Clark, certainly the trade for Quinnen Williams at the end of the year that might bear fruit in the future. But Matt Eberflus kind of there to pay for the sins of a concept that seemed flawed to begin with this season. Yeah,
listen, and Al Golden hanging on to his job. As you mentioned, Cincinnati had the second worst defense in the league. Cowboys right down there. You see last in the different rankings they had as well. And as I've always said, coaches don't miss tackles or miss assignments, right? It's the players that do that. But what you're looking for when you don't have the talent on the field that matches, i.e. a Cowboys defense or a Cincinnati defense, what ownership should be looking for is, how are you scheming, right? Are you scheming to be successful? If you don't have the horses to win one-on-one battles, can you scheme some success? And these teams still finish last or close to last in a lot of categories, but it's how much, when you look at the tape, do you say, okay, that's on the coach, that's on the player?
Yep, and again, with both defenses involved in this conversation in Washington and Dallas, I understand moves being made. The Cliff Kingsbury one, especially while you've been trying to focus all your energy as Washington in the last couple of years, finding that quarterback to try and support him in all the ways possible. If this is a move that runs counter to what Jaden Daniels feels comfortable with and wants, then you're really playing with fire at a time where this year you saw how quickly you can get burned. So again, Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Witt, Matt Eberflus, all out in their respective roles, coaching and coordinating in the NFC East. We still got plenty more coming up, including coming up next as we take a look ahead. Kenny Minchey reversing course quickly and heading towards Lexington. What are the ripple effects for this portal flip? Next on Golic Golic. Welcome back to As the Portal Turns here on Golic Golic. Great news if you're someone that calls Ann Arbor home or just likes the football team. Bryce Underwood is back at Michigan after a month of turmoil following the dismissal of Sharon Moore as the head coach, the hiring of former Utah head coach Kyle Whittingham. Michigan accomplished the biggest offseason goal of keeping their very highly paid signal caller in their uniform. So, Dad, big news here. Obviously, we talked about so many of the things surrounding this job being pointed towards this outcome. So, has to feel like yet another win. Now in a series of a couple they've strung together post Sharon Moore. Yeah, and you wonder, did Bryce Underwood just want to stay at Michigan no matter the coach? Or how big a deal is Kyle Whittingham being named the coach and his reputation? How much did that help? Because Michigan really, through the last part of being so late into the head coaching hiring, really got a home run in Kyle. So you wonder how much that had to do with Underwood. I had to imagine it's a ton to provide that stability and calm for someone that's done it at a high level, does bring his offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, along, who I mentioned before on this show, has an offense that could be a very interesting fit for where Bryce Underwood's skill set is now in a positive way. The other thing I do wonder about, and I don't know if we heard much about this, we knew Michigan was paying him a boatload of money. I don't know if there was anything reworked in that, as we see some quarterbacks who are staying home going through rework deals, usually in the positive end, getting a bump in pay. But you do wonder what the market was like out there, right? We see still some quarterbacks out here taking visits. LSU still very firmly in the mix with Lane Kiffin, as it was announced Trinidad Chambliss, if he gets another waiver for another year of eligibility, was going to go back to Ole Miss. You've got Sam Levitt potentially visiting there now as well. But Bryce Underwood was a guy that was committed to LSU out of high school, albeit under a different regime. And I'm sure still in this market could have been someone extremely valuable. But you do wonder what that looks like and how close it ever got to that point. None of which we know, because this is still a process pretty shrouded in mystery. We have no idea. I was going to say you don't know until you sign on the dotted line, but we don't even know if that's in concrete. We have no idea if signing on the dotted line means indelible ink or pencil, and it can just be erased and put to another team, or how much guys are going to flip-flop like our own Notre Dame's Kenny Minchey. Well, it's a great idea. Like, again, I don't know the specifics of Kenny Minchey's contract yet, but he's a guy that didn't play meaningful snaps at Notre Dame and was pursued like someone who did, and originally had committed to the Nebraska Cornhuskers and then reversed course a day later to sign and play for new Kentucky head coach Will Stein and the Wildcats. So, Dad, this obviously ticked off a lot of Nebraska fans, but this is nothing new. I think what we're seeing in the portal is fans going through the college football recruiting life cycle in a microwave 2-week setting. Where in recruiting, you get to know some of these names. You have a guy committed for a while. You always understand there's the chance that they could flip late in their career towards signing day. Kenny Minchey just did all that in a shorter time period before Nebraska fans even got to know him well enough to be super angry, even though I'm sure some of them still are.
And it's amazing because, listen, Kenny Minchey is a Notre Damer. We wish him the best of luck, but he has no tape. Right? I mean, kind of like the last quarterback from Notre Dame who went in the portal, Steve Angeli, had the one great drive. What was it, against Georgia at the end of the half? And he signs with Syracuse, unfortunately, got hurt. But Kenny Minchey was in a battle with C.J. Carr. Marcus talked about how it was a great competition, but Minchey has barely any meaningful tape out there, and was wooed by more than a few colleges. Agreed to one and then reversed and goes to another, and big time schools as well. So the portal is an amazing thing. It seems, whether you have experience or not.
And it kind of seems to mimic, Dad, what we see at the NFL level all the time, where you talk about, what a difference a coordinator can make in somebody's life. Liam Cohen comes over as this great offensive mind that's helped Trevor Lawrence and this team revitalize their career. We see that all the time at that level. And in college now, it seems to be guys following coordinators, guys that will be head coaches like Will Stein, that they believe could help them. Because if you're Kenny Minchey, it's hard to blame him given the work you've seen Will Stein do at Oregon, both this year with Dante Moore, last year with Bo Nix, following up on the work that Kenny Dillingham had done with Bo as the offensive coordinator there. So these guys are looking around like you do coming out of high school, but I think with even more urgency around the decision. So if you hurt a few feelings along the way, it's kind of, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet if you're these guys making such an important decision.
Are you still surprised, unless it's been by their decision, that Levitt and Lagaway, the former Florida quarterback, don't have new homes yet?
I have a feeling that's by their decision. Levitt, it sounds like, going to be taking the visit to LSU. Kentucky had him in for a visit, but then pivoted over this weekend when Levitt chose to take the visit to LSU. I think Lagway's already been to Florida State and is supposed to visit Virginia. So those guys will have homes, and certainly for everyone, it's trying to kind of gauge that ability to say, all right, how long do we want to be out here? You don't want to be outside without a partner all that long, or do we want to wait on a prospect that we think is better and attainable for us? So we're all learning it in real time. And to Kenny Minchey, good luck. You're going to look good in blue.
Yes.
You already wore half those colors already for your career. Just take the gold out and do the white instead. So plenty of that, more to look forward to. Got plenty more to look forward to coming up after us here on FanDuel Sports Network. Countdown Live, presented by Prime, hosted by our very own Stan Verrett. You got a ton of sports available to you each and every night here on FanDuel Sports Network. Stan and the crew are going to get you all the news, notes, and information you need to feel good walking into the night. Coming up next, who should feel good about how their job looks to some of these head coaching candidates on the market? We'll ask Ted Wynn that next here on Golic Golic. Welcome back to Golic Golic. The NFL world keeps turning, and we got questions that need answers. Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr., as everyone is kind of trying to figure out where all of the different pieces on the chessboard are going to fall, with head coaches being jobs being vacated, different guys on the market, and a player pool, I should say, of players in the head coaching game that doesn't necessarily have one standout candidate. So for more on that and the rest of what we're seeing as some NFL off seasons begin right now, Ted Wynn kind of have to join us here, senior NFL writer over at The Athletic, co-host of the Just Win podcast, covering the Raiders with our buddy Marshall Newhouse. Ted, good to see you, man. How you doing?
Good seeing you.
We appreciate the time today, man. And I want to start with the Raiders because they were one of the teams that made the decision to fire their head coach. Pete Carroll gone by the wayside. GM John Spytek sticks around here, but all the talk of Tom Brady's role in all this, I think from us on the outside looking in, who maybe don't spend every day with this team, kind of begs the question, like, how would you describe the power structure in Las Vegas and who's ultimately got their hands on the wheel for the decisions that have to be made next year?
Yeah, I think it was a weird transition with Tom Brady becoming a minority owner. And I think, as of today, they made an announcement that Tom Brady and John Spytek are going to be leading the charge to look for a new head coach. But before they made that announcement, it was kind of murky with how much influence Tom Brady really had in that building, and him being a commentator as well for Fox. So it's clear that Brady's going to be in charge of this hire with John Spytek. And last year it was kind of a strange marriage with Spytek and Carroll. There just wasn't a sense that there was alignment with what John Spytek wanted and what Pete Carroll wanted. It took a long time for Pete Carroll to finally start playing some of the rookies that John Spytek drafted. And I think there was some disagreement with how much those guys should have played and how early on they should have played. So I think now that you have an opportunity to have a more streamlined marriage with the general manager and head coach, hopefully that kind of solves some of the issues with the Raiders.
Who are some of the potential first time? We know about the Brian Flores of the world who were head coaches, but who are some of the potential coordinators that would be first time head coaches?
I think Clint Kubiak has to be ahead of that list because you have the number one pick. You're likely going to pick a quarterback, and ideally you would get an offensive mind that could help develop that quarterback and grow with that quarterback and not leave for another head coaching job. And Clint Kubiak obviously is the number one offensive-minded head coach in this cycle. His offense would fit Fernando Mendoza, the projected number one pick, perfectly. So I think he's the top of your list. I think guys like Jesse Minter, who's done a great job with the Chargers defense, Chris Shula, who's done a great job with the Rams defense, are on that list too. But obviously when you hire a defensive-minded guy, that offensive coordinator hire has to be a home run right off the bat.
Two-parter here. You mentioned Mendoza. Is that for you the auto draft pick at number one right now for the Raiders?
Yeah, to me, I think he's the top pick. I mean, I think the Raiders have kind of tried to Band-Aid over this quarterback problem for too long without drafting one in the first round. They haven't drafted a quarterback in the first round since 2007 when they drafted Jamarcus Russell, number one overall, and maybe they are still feeling the embarrassment and pain from that a little bit, and that's kind of why they shied away from it. But it's about time that they finally draft a quarterback, develop him, and they have an opportunity with the number one pick now. And I think they have an opportunity to pair Mendoza with a young coach and finally do a full reset.
With that in mind, then, outside of quarterback, which obviously is at the top of the list, what's the biggest thing the Raiders need to do this offseason, and how much or little is Max Crosby and his status with the team involved in that?
Yeah, I think with Max Crosby, if he is really at odds with the front office, and he's been a great soldier throughout the entire Raiders franchise timeline, even though things have gone on the wayside and there's been dysfunction. He stated that he wants to be a Raider, but if it's, if he finally had enough and he really wants to trade, I think that the Raiders are at a point where they should probably entertain it because they are not a year away from competing. Crosby's going to he's not old, but he's going to get to a point where he's going to start declining. So if you can get 2 first-round draft picks and more for him, that's something you would entertain. Obviously, you want to keep a player like that in the building, but if he's finally had enough and you're getting offers, I think it's something that you have to listen to.
Is Bill Belichick going to be in anybody's sight lines?
I don't think so. I mean, I hope not at this point, seeing the circus that has gone on with North Carolina. I don't think he's as bad as a college coach as some people make him out to be. I thought North Carolina did make some progress, but I don't think he should be an NFL coach. I just don't think that Patriots tree, the Patriots way, works in the NFL anymore. And we've seen so many of his guys flame out. I cannot imagine that a team wants to bring that type of environment to their franchise.
Looking elsewhere around the NFL, we were talking earlier in the show about the Washington Commanders, their decision to not only part ways with defensive coordinator Joe Whitt, but also offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury, who this time last year was the OC on a team with a successful rookie quarterback, making it to the NFC Championship, getting head coaching interviews. How did we wind up at this point with the franchise and him parting ways?
Yeah, to me, this one is a confusing one because it's hard to imagine finding another offense coordinator that could tailor the offense around Jayden Daniels and his strength like Kingsbury did. And obviously, we saw great results in year one. And year two, they dealt with a ton of injuries. Jayden Daniels didn't play for most of the season, and they were still a respectable offense, and they still were productive. I think ultimately they wanted to go to a direction in which they could protect Jayden Daniels a little bit more and turn him into more of a traditional quarterback. But that's going to be a big transition, and it's not a guarantee that Jayden Daniels can successfully make that transition because being able to run, being able to scramble is such a big part of his game. I think most of this is wanting to protect Jayden, but at the same time, I mean, if you take away the thing that he does best, it's not a guarantee that he's going to be successful in a new system.
6 openings right now of head coaches in the NFL. Do we think there will be any more in the near future?
I think this should be it, unless a team the Ravens, are kind of kicking around the idea, or reportedly kicking around the idea of moving on from John Harbaugh, which I think would be a mistake. There's some rumors that the Packers are entertaining moving away from Matt LaFleur, which is kind of insane to me. So maybe those 2 spots. I think there's just rumblings around those 2 spots right now. But I think for now, this list looks like it's pretty solidified.
Yeah, I think a lot of those franchises don't realize the rich people problems they have when it comes to their complaints about their head coaches and what goes on in a lot of these situations here. Looking ahead, we've got the wild card round coming up this weekend in the playoffs, and in the division with the Raiders, one of the most oft talked about teams and quarterbacks, the 1 seed Denver Broncos and Bo Nix. As you look at the playoff field right now, that we know is going to be without a lot of the usual future Hall of Fame names that we see and expect at quarterback, where do you stack Bo Nix among the field of quarterbacks that we have in the dance?
I think he's probably as far as the AFC, I would probably put him last. I mean, I probably have a lower opinion about Bo Nix than most people, definitely people in Denver. I just think he's been mostly inconsistent. He had some really low lows in the beginning of the season. To start off the year, he was the most inaccurate quarterback as far as off-target passes over 10 yards in the league for the first 6 weeks of the season. He kind of stabilized. He started hitting some of these deep opportunities that that offense opens up for him. And he's gotten better, but he did kind of fall off at the last 2 games of the season, really struggled against the Chargers backups. So I don't know what I'm going to get out of Bo Nix. I think it's really inconsistent, and he could be the reason why they end up losing. I mean, I know he makes plays in the fourth quarter when they really need it, but at the same time, he's the reason why they're in this hole with that type of defense and the offensive line in the first place.
We saw Sam Darnold's last 2 regular seasons, and boy, save for the last game of the regular season last year in the playoffs where it did not go well. So on that note, who do you trust more of the number 1 seeded quarterbacks, Bo Nix or Sam Darnold?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I think Sam Darnold has really struggled ever since they played the Rams in Week 9 with turnovers, and it seems like they're calling plays to really protect the offense and put him out of a situation where he'll turn the ball over. I think I'll go with Sam Darnold. I think even though that Sam Darnold turnover is always, it seems like that risk is looming, I think we've seen him make some big throws and kind of find ways to make plays throughout. And hopefully he's gotten those big game experience, and he'll learn from it, and he'll come through this time around.
Difficult decisions, no matter how you slice it, and that for the 2 teams that right now sit atop their respective conferences. Ted, always great catching up, man. We appreciate the time, and enjoy the rest of the chaos of this week before we get to the wild card round. Should be good.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate it. Well, with all the musical chairs in mind this week, we wanted to kind of nail down and assess the jobs that are open right now. Again, you've got the Cardinals, the Browns, the Titans, the Raiders, the Falcons, and the Giants, all who either vacated their head coaching spots during the season, a la the Giants and the Titans, or have let their coaches go at the start of this week. So, Dad, if I asked you to rank these jobs, let's start off with number one. What do you think is the best job available this offseason among the ones we have here?
So I would say the top three are the teams with quarterbacks, New York, Tennessee, and Atlanta. And the bottom three would be teams that are going to have new quarterbacks, Arizona, Las Vegas. Now, Cleveland, we don't know. So Cleveland's kind of the wild card of that group. Even if they bring back a quarterback, it's a quarterback who was not a first rounder and supposed to be a franchise quarterback. So we'll see. I would say number one would be the Giants. You have a great left tackle. You have a heck of a pass rushing D-line, and you have your quarterback, as long as obviously he doesn't spend time in the blue tent getting his head looked at. You get Cam Scattergoo back as well, the meat and potatoes running back. So I think that and ownership is somewhat stable there, save for maybe the mistake of letting Saquon Barkley go last year. I would say New York would be number one.
I think that's the right answer. You look, they also got draft capital coming up. They're going to have the 5th overall pick in this year's draft, which could be a valuable piece. They're going to get Malik Neighbors back healthy again, a guy who looks like he could be a perennial Pro Bowl wide receiver when healthy, and a true difference maker. So I'm with you. You can look and see the bones there. Maybe the Joe Shane of it all knocks it down a little bit for you at GM, but in general, I think it checks all those boxes you mentioned. You mentioned Atlanta having a quarterback. Are you sold on that? By the way, Michael Penix Jr. injured this year, older quarterback coming in with a rampant injury history. Still haven't got what we feel like is an extended look at high-level play from him. They just reworked the deal for Kirk Cousins that we'll get more into in a bit to try and make that a little more palatable for the cap number this year, with a decision looming when they get to March this season. Like, do you feel like that is a solve? Because I had that as sort of a question mark for Atlanta to go along with the other they have a ton of positives there, but quarterback to me was more of a maybe than a yes.
I feel like he's going to be the quarterback there at least for next year and get a chance to prove that, right? Because it'll be his 3rd year. They don't have to do anything until after that year. The draft, especially, they were 8 and 9. They're not going to have a high pick, so you're not going to get somebody with this draft class in the first round that you're going to go to. So I think for this next year, obviously he has to come back from the injury. I think him with Drake London, with hopefully Kyle Pitts, we'll see what they do with him, Bijan Robinson, a pretty good pass rushing defense. I definitely think Penix is at the very least the quarterback for next year. So yeah, I'm pretty confident in that.
Atlanta's an interesting situation also relative to another decision on their staff, and it's way far down. This is really inside baseball, but my guy I know, Duke Manyweather, tweeted it out, so I'll echo it. Dwayne Ledford's one of the better offensive line coaches in the NFL, and if Atlanta lets him walk out of the building, it would be a mistake and a legitimate game changer for someone else. So something in the weeds to keep an eye on there. We mentioned the Giants job, how attractive it is. Reports that Kevin Stefanski interviewing tomorrow for that New York Giants job. So a marriage that I know a lot of Giants fans in my life already looked at and kind of felt good about there. And so the Titans at third's interesting because the sell really for them is Cam Ward. Like, this is the one I called this year's Drake Maye, where it's the rose through concrete situation. There's not a lot else there on the roster, save, a couple of star defensive pieces on a defense that still was bad overall to sell, besides a quarterback that in circumstances that should not have produced good results looked like a guy who is a future perennial starter in this league. So is that enough? Like, you've got the 4th overall pick in the draft to go along with that this year, but you really need a culture overhaul the way they got with Vrabel in New England.
You do, but I think they're still in a better situation because they have a high draft pick, because they potentially have their quarterback. I would put them 3rd over Arizona, Vegas, and Cleveland, however we want to rank them from a talent standpoint. The quarterback really being the main issue, and a high draft pick helps.
So, all right, ranking the bottom 3 jobs then. I went Browns, Raiders, and Cardinals purely because the Browns draft capital, 2 first-rounders this year, and the 6th and 28th pick that won via Jacksonville at 28. And also, you've got an elite defense. Like, you've got the best defensive player on the planet in a group that this year, with no help from offense, was able to get it done, despite the fact that your quarterback situation is a giant cluster. You know what? You've at least got the ammo to go out and address it. So do you think this is the best of the bad jobs?
Yes, I agree. For that reason, they may have the quarterback, they may not. We'll wait and see. But the offensive side of the ball was bad. But that defense, boy, oh boy, was really something else. So yeah, I put them there. And then Vegas, because listen, you have Brock Bowers on offense. I know Ashton Genty, we'll see what he does, but you have Brock Bowers and Max Crosby. If Max Crosby stays, we'll have to see. But you have two at the absolute best at their positions on either side of the ball. Obviously, they need a quarterback. And Arizona has just basically been in no man's land for a while.
Arizona is interesting because you've also got potentially the best tight end in football and Trey McBride on that team.
Yeah, right.
You've got a defense with some good young parts, Will Johnson in the back end, Walter Nolan in the front end to go along, with guys that have also been stockpiled there on a defense that just always kind of felt island of misfit toysy. But then you've got the quarterback situation looming as well, kind of the spiritual counterpart to Miami with what Kyler Murray becomes going forward for them, but less of a path forward, right? The Raiders have the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Barring something unforeseen, Fernando Mendoza is going to be the quarterback answer there, and you're going to get to try and go to work on the other parts of that team, namely the lines of scrimmage, specifically on offense, that you have to fix to try and make that happen. So it does kind of leave Arizona as the odd man out at this point where, yeah, you've got the number 3 pick in this draft. So if Dante Moore decides to come out and could be within range, are you someone that could try and move up or hold steady there to get him? Ty Simpson, we're still waiting to figure out what's going to happen there, but it's a little murkier beyond maybe 1 and 2, and you've still got other holes to fill in that organization.
And also, listen, Jacoby Brissett is 33, but you have a good bridge quarterback there, right? I mean,
sure.
He ended up playing 14 games for them, 23 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, completing 65% of his passes. That's a guy at least you can trust unless you're wherever you're going to draft a quarterback or pick up a quarterback. He's a really good, and that's probably selling him short, saying he's just a bridge quarterback.
I think that's what he is, though, quite honestly. Like, he's not someone's long-term answer at this point in his career. But the importance of being able to perform well now, not to be outdone. I mean, the Raiders just hired Pete Carroll fired Pete Carroll after one disastrous season. We thought Aaron Glenn might have a chance. Like, long-term rebuilds are fun to look at, but very hard to live through and sometimes have bad results for the person in charge. Coming up next, a good result for a team moving on in the playoffs. DK Metcalf returning for Pittsburgh. We'll tell you how big of an impact this makes and if the Steelers can actually win a playoff game this year. Next on Golic Golic and Golic back here on a Tuesday. And spoiler alert, will be tomorrow as well on Wednesday with Katron Allen, one of the 2 members of the most potent backfield in Penn State football history, set to join us as he begins to embark on his journey towards the National Football League. Going to be fun to catch up with him. Don't miss it tomorrow here on Golic and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. back with you guys today. And while Penn State's going to try and figure out how to fill the void left behind from Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, the void getting filled quickly in Pittsburgh. DK Metcalf back and better than ever for the Steelers. They get set for their playoff matchup on Wild Card Weekend, having missing 2 games because of the suspension related to that altercation with the fan in the Detroit Lions game. DK Metcalf had a lot to say coming back about everything but that altercation. But he mentioned how excited he is to be back out there and how much the team is looking forward to it. Remember, in the 2 games without Metcalf, they lost 1 in Week 17, 13-6 to the Cleveland Browns, so weren't able to put up anything in that game, including in the waning moments. And then in the first half of the Sunday night game against the Ravens, only 98 yards passing and 3 points. Kenneth Gainwell and Jaylen Warren were the leading receivers for them in the first half of that game. So how much does his return impact what you think they're capable of in the playoffs?
Oh, monstrous. And not just him catching the ball, but him pushing and stretching the defense. Like on a long pass, he'll stretch the defense, make them back off. So shorter passes may show up for others. You're talking about these games. The Browns game that they lost, Jonnu Smith was the leading receiver with 5 catches, not in yards, but in catches. He had 5 catches. That's a tight end. And remember, they tried the 2 fade routes to Valdez-Scantling, where those would have been to DK Metcalf. Now, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is 6'4", but Metcalf is a beast, and we know he would get those fade routes. And in the game they won, the game that I called against Baltimore, the leading receiver was Kenneth Gainwell, the running back. 9 targets, 8 receptions. He split out wide like a wide receiver on more than a couple of sets. So no wide receivers led the way in the 2 games DK Metcalf was out, and they had the choice of Velko Scantling, Scotty Miller, Ben Skoranek had some snaps in this last game, Adam Thielen, and Calvin Austin was back for this Baltimore game as well after missing the Cleveland game with a hammy. But he so opens up the offense with short passes, medium passes, long passes, that they are just got so happy to have him back, especially against a stifling defense like Houston, so Aaron Rodgers can get the ball out to DK.
I won't pick them to win this game, but your point about the impact is well served. This year, for DK Metcalf in terms of usage, 5th in the NFL in yards after the catch over expected, so can make extra effort plays for this offense where he's the overwhelming leading receiver. And among receivers with at least 50 targets on the year, 29.4% of his routes were go routes, straight routes up the sideline, 7th highest rate in the NFL among receivers in that category. And slants, 13.8% of his routes were slant. That's the highest rate in the NFL for a wide receiver with at least 50 targets. So he has got 2 defined jobs for this offense that are going to help, but I ultimately don't think get them over the Houston Texans defense size hump, because as we saw, hey, the Browns did that without an offense to speak of on the other side. The Texans can at least get streaky there. So I have my doubts about what they're capable of, but no question they're better with him involved, period.
With it. Go routes and slants. I mean, you said it. Those are the 2 best routes for DK Metcalf getting big yards, whether he's running after the catch or just catching a deep ball.
Great when you've got that Texans defensive front bearing down your neck, too, if you're Aaron Rodgers. Coming up next, speaking of things bearing down your neck, Charlie Weiss Jr. has had plenty of travel bearing down his. We'll explain a chaotic week to start his quest for a championship. Hour number 2 here on Golic and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. Still plenty more coming your way. Jaylinn Hawkins from the New England Patriots going to join us, talk about their resurgent season and Mike Vrabel's effect on that franchise. And Tommy Lloyd, the Arizona Wildcats men's basketball coach, going to stop by the number 1 ranked Arizona men's Wildcat basketball team with some studs on that squad heading into a dogfight in the Big 12 this year. Going to be fun to chat about there. I'm assuming when we bring him on, we're going to hit him with a Happy New Year, Dad. What's the shelf life on that? You've been doing sports talk a lot longer than me. I feel like this is a yearly discussion where people are always wondering, how long can I continue to say Happy New Year as a greeting out in public?
Quite honestly, I think a week. You know, I think till like the 7th or the 8th, if January 1st to the go a week from that. I think it's fine. I think after that, you kind of people are like, okay, been there, done that.
Yeah, I think a week at your place of work, and after that, I think you get an additional week if it's the first time you're seeing someone near and dear to you in the new year. If you haven't seen a friend, you guys haven't been able to do that,
right,
and you're looking for like a conversation starter there, a Happy New Year kind of gets the ball rolling in a way I think is socially acceptable there. But I'm with you. A week feels like the sweet stop before all of a sudden you're abusing power just to try and get through your grocery checkout line in one piece. So glad we've got the rules of engagement settled there. Let's get everyone caught up on the 3-point stance for the rest of what you need to know around the world of sports. Let's start off with this. The Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins agreed to modify the final 2 years of the quarterback's deal. As part of the restructures, there's now a guarantee in the amount of $67.9 million in the 2027 season that's going to vest on March 13th. So that becomes the decision date for them. It drops his base salary for next year from $35 million to $2.1 million, freeing up cap space for this offseason as Atlanta looks to find a new head coach and figure out the rest of the direction of that position. Unfortunate news for the Oregon Ducks coming off their win against Texas Tech in the college football playoff. Running back Jordan Davison suffered a broken clavicle and will very likely not play the rest of the playoffs, according to Aaron J. Fentress at the Oregonian. The true freshman stud had 15 total touchdowns this season, so big bit of offensive firepower loss for them. Big gain for Ole Miss, though. LSU's administration is allowing offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss Jr. and running backs coach Kevin Smith to continue coaching Ole Miss in the college football playoff this week in their semifinal matchup against Miami in the Fiesta Bowl. Sources told ESPN. Weiss and Smith were both following former Ole Miss coach Lane Kiffin to LSU, flew to Baton Rouge, Louisiana on Monday for recruiting visits, then came back to Oxford later in that night. Saw my former head coach and his father, Charlie Weiss Sr., documenting this, basically saying Charlie's the offensive coordinator at 2 different schools right now, trying to get it done and making it happen with very little sleep. So it's a challenge, but Are you surprised we're even having to report this? Like the phrasing there that LSU is allowing this to happen seems a bit craven given the opportunity that Ole Miss has in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, Mississippi should be embracing this. I mean, being able to keep coaches. I mean, look at Oregon, right? Their two coordinators are going to coach other jobs, and I believe they're still coaching Oregon. I mean, we're making a huge deal out of this because of Lane Kiffin, right? And this is all because of Lane, because we've seen coaches, especially assistants, stay with their team before, but this is a Lane Kiffin headline, right, where 4 coaches stayed. Now only 2, Joe Cox and George McDonald, are not going to be there. They're on the coaching staff going to LSU with Lane Kiffin, but they coached in the first Mississippi game, but they're not coaching anymore. This is not like it hasn't happened before.
No, it certainly hasn't. That's why all this feels petty in a way that's unfortunate and unfair to everybody. Like we talked about this earlier last week. Felt like such a golden opportunity for Lane to come out here in the midst of all this and wave his hand and say, no, of course these guys can stay and help this Ole Miss team that I wanted to stay and coach through this playoff run, go out here and accomplish the job in front of them still, while having to understandably balance both of their responsibilities the way all those other coaches that you just mentioned are getting ready to do right now. But instead, the way this is being positioned, trying to make it sound like LSU is doing Ole Miss some kind of favor in this process. And I don't know, just sort of reeks of how awkward this has always been. We talked about it. These are two bitter rivals that are going through this weird divorce of one coach and watching him couple up with the new school in a way that's pretty hard to tolerate. But I think Pete Golding summed it up best. Like, he's really tried to downplay this. And I think as long as you've got Charlie Weiss Jr. there in the seat with Trinidad Chambliss, who, if they win, is going to be a massive reason why, I think you can feel pretty good about this having at least a more mitigated effect on this outcome than maybe we thought a couple weeks ago.
I think without a doubt, Charlie Weiss Jr. is the absolute linchpin to this whole thing. He's still there. I think everything is fine. Pete Golden, who took over as the head coach, has the new coaching staff, had them sitting in on the meetings with the coaches who are going to LSU, just in case there was a disruption, of which there is. 2 coaches are going back to LSU, but he had the coaches for next year sitting in to kind of pick up the slack. So they're going to be fine. This is more a headline and a talking point on shows like ours than anything that's going to have an effect on this team. And the main reason is Charlie Weiss Jr. still calling the plays.
It is. I don't want to discount that in the margins, everything matters in these games, and that if you're messing with the chain of command at an important point of the season, it's certainly going to have some effect. And God love it. I love our friend Peter Burns, who maybe said this cloaked in some LSU colors, the idea that maybe Lane Kiffin actually helped galvanize this team with its decision. The team deserves a lot of credit for how they've responded to this. Yeah. Lane Kiffin deserves none of it outside of the job that he did coaching these guys during the regular season.
Exactly.
Period. And end of sentence. So, glad that Charlie Jr. is getting to see this through. I'm sure it's been a difficult week, but that's what the money's for, and the opportunity to actually still go out here and legitimately have an opportunity. We'll break down these games later on. I do think there are some real paths to victory for Ole Miss against a Miami team that's looked like one of the hottest in football over the last couple of rounds of the college football playoff. But we'll save that story for another day. The story of today, Dad, is transition. Fittingly enough, on a day where once again we spent a ton of time talking about the transfer portal in the world of college football, coaches moving around, jobs there. Now we're seeing these reports out of the NBA that apparently Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks are now working together to try and find a trade partner ahead of that February 5th trade deadline, to try and find an outcome that makes sense for everyone involved. We know Trae Young, while injured this year, saw this Hawks team actually perform pretty well without him. Jalen Johnson and other guys playing more with the ball. And so Trae Young now, with a big-time salary in excess of $40 million, is someone that's searching for a new home. I guess the question becomes, Dad, at this point, for a player who is limited off ball and certainly defensively is small, but an incredible passer and a guy that can score at a high level, how valuable is he, and to who right now, looking out at the rest of the NBA landscape?
Well, he becomes a piece now, right? I mean, he was the main man. He's in his 8th year. He's only 27 years old. It's not like he's an old
in his
man,
prime.
but he's been in the league for a while, and he's been the main cog for a while. And now Some do. Some stay the main pieces for a longer time. Others go and be a complementary piece, and that's what he's going to do. It's interesting. A player that was of his caliber, you wonder how the ego takes the hit, right? When all of a sudden you're the man and they're building around you, to now you're going to be, if you're traded, you're going to be part of the puzzle for another team. Still probably an important piece, but they're not building around you anymore. And everybody is different, right, in how they handle it. But how do you handle that? How you do handle being the man in a sport that is a high visible sport that does not have a lot of players on the court, and you're the guy they're building around. Now all of a sudden you're not that guy anymore.
So I saw a couple, Sam Viceni over at The Athletic kind of posed some different trade candidates, and the first one went off like sirens in my head. Trae Young feels like a future Washington Wizard. Like, isn't that just where big contracts and players who can score in bunches but have trouble doing a bunch of other things just kind of go to ride out the duration of that deal on a team that's once again second to last in the Eastern Conference, like not a good basketball team in a way that outside of a few years with John Wall early on and maybe some Bradley Beal, they never really have been in my adult lifetime. Like, that feels like destiny right now.
That would be something. I mean, would a team that's in contention again trade for him? He's just 27, and it'd be, depending on how you use him. I don't know. That's going to be an interesting piece. Again, he's only played 10 games this year because of injury, so that obviously is a sticking point as well. But that will be an interesting case for a guy who's in his 8th year and just 27.
I struggle to see a contender shifting serious capital without getting stuff in return. Like in the NBA, we see salary dumps a lot more often tied to draft capital than in leagues like the NFL that we cover way more often. But at the very least, he can feel good about this. I put a poll up because I saw two guys in similar situations in different leagues and had the question, and apparently the answer is pretty resounding. I asked, who's a more desirable player to trade for in their respective league? Trae Young in the NBA or Tua Tagovailoa in the NFL? And the resounding answer was Trae Young. Right now, just under 810 votes, 89% in favor of Trae Young. So as Tua Tagovailoa comes out and says, hey, a fresh start would be, in his words, dope as hell, seeing maybe the tea leaves in Miami where Mike McDaniel might be retained, but Tua benched at the end of the season with questions about his future. A lot fewer people see him as viable. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, there's not much difference in the money. I think Trae Young's making $45 million this year. so not much difference in the money. I think I would answer that Trae Young as well. I don't know where a future home is, Mike, for him to be traded to unless Miami picks up a decent amount of that money. I mean, it seems we know what Tua is. We've kind of seen him hit the ceiling and know what his specialty is, and it's a lot of money for that. So unless they got a deal on the money by Miami picking up some of it, I don't see a viable trade partner.
Yeah, I don't think Tua is a starter in the NFL next year or likely going forward based on what we've seen as of late, which is a wild turn of events, but where we currently sit right now. Coming up next, let's talk about someone who's not only a starter, but a starter on a team with big hopes headed to the postseason. Jaylinn Hawkins going to join us and talk about the second-ranked Patriots and the task ahead of them here on Golic and Golic. Welcome back to Golic and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., wild card weekend coming up here in the NFL, and a lot of eyes going to be back in New England, back in the playoffs and hosting games in Gillette for the first time in a while as the 2 seed behind a year made possible by a former Patriot, Mike Vrabel, who comes in and takes the head coaching job with Drake Maye at the helm. But so many people have made this season the success that it is for New England, including our next guest. Jaylinn Hawkins kind enough to join us right now, starting safety for the 2nd seed New England Patriots in the AFC. Jaylinn, good to see you, man. How you doing?
What's up, man? I'm doing good. How y'all doing?
Good, thanks.
We're doing well. And so for you, just, this season right now, as you sit here, you were someone that was here last year as a huge part of the special teams outfit for the Patriots, going through some of the bumps and bruises of losing when Mike Vrabel comes in. How do you already look back and reflect on what you guys have accomplished this season?
Oh man, we came a long way, man. We started in the OTAs in the spring. We had a culture and stuff that was presented to us. Everybody bought in, and we just been chipping at it, week by week, and now we're here. So it's a blessing.
What mentality did Mike Vrabel bring to this team?
Oh man, he brought a real good mentality, man. I would say just a hardworking mentality, a brotherhood. I feel like he brought that to the team. That brotherhood segment, as far as that goes, man, like we're all close, and I think that's like one of the biggest things he came in and brought in. He also just taught us how to just be accountable for each other, hold each other accountable, and play for one another when we're out there, man, and enjoy ball. So he brought a lot to this team, and I respect him more than anything, and I'm thankful for that.
And certainly you've brought a lot to this team. We mentioned your role last year. I know coaches on this staff sticking around fought hard to keep you on this team, and you bet on yourself. You bet on yourself leaving Atlanta before and now coming here on this one-year deal this year in New England. How gratifying is it to see what you've accomplished this year in your role with this team?
Oh, blessings, man, blessings. I thank God first and foremost, man. Without him, I wouldn't be here. He just gave me the opportunity, to excel and, help this team out in any way I can, if it's special teams, if it's playing safety, or playing whatever I got to play, to just help us get these wins. And, I'm happy to just be a part of that. And I'm happy where we're at right now.
So, again, you were a fourth-round pick in 2020 with Atlanta, and you split time in 23 with Atlanta and the Chargers. So, for a time, you were teammates with Justin Herbert. So, what was it like seeing him in practice? Now you get to see him in a game.
Oh, man, dude's a baller. I mean, good quarterback, big arm, can throw it skyrocket, got an amazing arm, amazing talent, can use his feet, tall, does it all, man. So I think he's a great quarterback, great guy as well. I'm actually cool. We cool people. So, man, it'll be fun going against him this Sunday.
It seems like a lot of similarities to your quarterback, Drake Maye. How would you compare the two?
I mean, there's some similarities. Both great quarterbacks, but there's also some differences. Obviously. But I would say they're both great quarterbacks, man, and both know what they're doing out there.
So you look at this Charger team and the weapons they have at receiver, from Johnson to McConkey to the old man Keenan Allen. Now, what kind of problems do they present?
A lot, man. They got a variety. Like you just stated it. You got McConkey, you got Keenan, you got Johnston, you got the tight end. Then they also have the rookie they drafted from Ole Miss. I mean, they all have different talents, man, and they all can hit you at any point on the field. You got the one of Johnston. He's fast, tall, physical, deep threat, makes good catches. Then you got McConkey. He can work the intermediate, the deep ball as well. And then Keenan's savvy. Everybody know Keenan route craft is amazing. So I feel like they got a lot, a good crew, and I'll be excited to go against on Sunday.
Mentioned your quarterback a little bit there. I certainly want to give you a minute on him as a guy. I know I'm sure you went against him practice a bunch before the season and during the season, but you don't need to campaign for him. It's not like you're voting for the award, but why has he put himself in position? How has he put himself in position this year to potentially be an MVP of this league?
I mean, obviously everybody sees it, Sunday what he's doing. The dude is doing some amazing stuff. That's catching everybody's eye. But I think it goes on to practice. I mean, the stuff that people don't really see. He's always like one of the last people to lead the field. Always getting extra routes with the receivers, working on his timing. Real pro. Always getting extra work on the sled. And, I salute to that. It's just cool when you see somebody put in the work and it's showing. So it's dope.
So you guys play the game in New England. It's basically the middle of winter, but the forecast really isn't too bad. It does show some rain. How do you prefer again going against an offense, especially a West Coast offense, in sloppy weather?
I mean, I feel like it's the playoffs, so everybody coming to play. Weather, can play a factor, but it can't. I'm not really buying into all that. I'm just coming prepared for doing what I got to do and prepared for them to get their best shot. It's the playoffs. So, weather, those are factors that you can't control, especially out here. You don't know what you can get. It can be cold, it can be raining, it can be snowing. So I'm just more so focused on them and, however they handle it is however they handle it. As long as we prepare, it's the biggest thing.
How do you handle it? I mean, you're a California guy, went to Cal in college, so are you a no sleeves guy? Like, how do you attack the cold?
I'm not gonna lie, I had to get used to it. Last year was my warm-up year because last year I was sleeved up. I mean, thermal down, I had hand warmers, you know, the
Yep.
socks, the warmers in my socks. I was trying to stay as warm as possible. But I think this year, like, my body just got accustomed to it. And I was like, okay, maybe I could throw just a one sleeve. You know, I could wear one sleeve. I could swag out a little bit this game in the cold. And then I'm like, okay. Then I figured out the Vaseline trick. I put a Vaseline on my arm, you know, close them pores up. And so, yeah, so I'm like, okay, I'm getting used to it. I might be a New Englander now.
Did somebody have to show you the Vaseline trick?
Yeah.
Who showed you?
I mean, I just like, I see, we're in the locker room. Like last year, I just seen a lot of people put Vaseline on their arms, legs, and I was confused. I'm like, I'm not ashy, so I don't need to put Vaseline on myself. but then, this year I figured it out. I used to train. I'm like, why are people putting Vaseline? They're like, it keeps you warm, closes the pores. So I was like, oh, yeah, let me do that. And it's been working out.
I think I just recently saw former NFL defensive lineman Bo Allen at the Eagles game last weekend, shirtless in the crowd, covered head to toe in Vaseline in honor of them. So nice to see everyone remembering the good tricks of the trade there. You mentioned swagging out a little bit, though. I've seen via your Instagram, you're a guy with pretty high fashion IQ. You like to show up to game day looking right. So I want to ask you, on the Patriots, best dressed in the locker room and worst dressed in the locker room, who would you nominate for both?
Yeah, I gotta go worst. Why I gotta do worst?
You can give me. How about this then? Your top three best. Well, I just figured it'd be some offensive lineman. Like, I was a former college O lineman. I understand that's usually our lot in life. But if you want to just give me the top three best dressed, then I'll take that.
I'll give you top three, and I'll exclude myself. I ain't even gonna put myself. I'll exclude myself. Top three, I'm gonna go Diggs. Diggs does his thing. Of course, everybody knows that. Let me think. There's some people that dress good on our team, man. I'm gonna go Diggs. I'm gonna go. I don't know, Marcus Jones. What Marcus Jones been putting on this year? I ain't gonna lie, I've been doing this thing. So I like what Marcus has been doing, man. My boy Marcus been doing this thing. Diggs, Marcus. For the third spot.
What about Vrabel? How would you consider his style as a dresser?
Coach got a little swag. He got a little swag. Whereas, his collar tee, 2 buttons down, you can see his chest a little bit. Nice rolly watch on the wrist, whatever he got going. Shoes, good, jeans is fitted. It ain't bad. Hair greased up, he got some swag. I ain't gonna lie. He got some swag.
All right, there we go.
It's not boring. It's not boring.
All right, never boring with Mike Vrabel. Certainly never boring with you, Jaylinn, around here. This has been awesome, man. Congrats on all the success this season. Been excited to watch your journey, and good luck this coming weekend in the wild card round, man. We're looking forward to watching.
Appreciate y'all, man. God bless.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Jaylinn. Appreciate it.
Something you and I never had to worry about was style in dressing. That's for sure.
No, I mean, again, like just playing college football, it was like I played I wonder what it's like now on college campuses, how much more pressure it is with guys with money. Because I always said back in the day playing college football when, the most guys were really getting was like a stipend check, you had a bunch of guys that were going to get their suits for like the 3-for-1 special at Joseph A. Bank. We were just making it worth with whatever they had at the University Park Mall in South Bend. And then 2 years ago, I see Caleb Williams accept the Heisman in a Gucci suit. Like, it's different now. So I bet that's even changed at the college level.
Well, I'm amazed when I go call these games and I'm on the sideline before the game and I see players with diamond necklaces on. They wear them during the game. That I don't understand. I mean, I don't get it why you would even risk that getting damaged somehow, some way. I mean, it must be some sort of fashion thing. Again, I'm clueless about that because I never cared how I looked on the field, except not wanting to have my gut hang out if I could help that. But I mean, wearing jewelry on the field, I was always amazed at that.
Yeah, I remember we went through that with Odell Beckham Jr. a couple years ago where he's wearing like that Richard Mille. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'm that poor. The watch on the field. It's like a
Yeah.
$100,000 watch. We had chain snatching in the recent past. You're right. The most I was worried about fashion-wise was wearing the road white uniforms, and you'd see a whole herd of offensive and defensive linemen before games in the shower trying to look into the mirror and see if they could smooth out any of their rolls, because the white, for whatever reason, makes you look way fatter than any other uniform combination. It is brutal. So thank you to Jaylinn Hawkins for showing up and showing out on that regard, making all the skinny guys proud and making all the fat guys feel bad. We want to make you feel good around here, NBA and NHL fans. If you guys ever have to miss a live game, check out the game replays on the FanDuel Sports Network app. As soon as the final whistle blows, you can watch every highlight, every big moment, all in your choice of a 5, 10, or 15-minute condensed game. Download the FanDuel Sports Network app today and make sure you check in on all the action that we got going on here. Coming up next, plenty of action. We'll see if Tommy Lloyd's got diamonds dancing on the sideline for the number 1 ranked Wildcats next on Golic and Golic. Welcome back to Golic and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. This fall, I was fortunate enough to go around the Big 12 calling college football games for TNT Sports and had a couple of visits to Tucson, Arizona. Enjoy covering Brent Brennan's Arizona Wildcat football team, a fun group there, but got to look in a bit on what they had going on in basketball as the season was getting over there. And we got to see a little preview and thought, this Wildcats team, they might be up to something here. And sure enough, the number 1 ranked Arizona Wildcats basketball team leads the country, and their head coach, Tommy Lloyd, leads the way for them. He's kind enough to join us here now on Golic and Golic. Coach, good to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me today, guys. And you guys do a great job in bringing some fun and entertainment to this world of sports.
Well, appreciate that. And my son, Mike, as he mentioned, he's been there a couple of times calling football games, and food always comes up. So let's just start there. Where's your go-to spot?
Wow. I mean, I got a few of them, and you know how it is. You got to probably be careful about naming names.
Yeah,
because,
true. True.
But as far as food type, when you come to Tucson, we're starting with the Sonoran dog, and probably going to have 2 of them. And what a Sonoran dog is, it's a bacon wrapped hot dog in this soft white bread with all the fixing on top. And it's, beans, mayo, mustard, and, it has some tomatoes and stuff like that, onions. It sounds like a lot, but I'm telling you what, it hits just right.
Well, you had me at wrapped
really
bacon.
Incredible.
Yeah, you had me at wrapped bacon.
Yeah. Well, I had one of those. So, Coach, Tucson is a very special place in my heart. I did not realize what an incredible food town Tucson was. And yet every time I came to your guys' campus, I had a Sonoran dog in the booth in one. I had a chimichanga in the other that was about the size of my head here. And I went to the Baja Cafe and had these pancakes that were more like breakfast case here. I had no idea. I mean, this community in Tucson certainly loves and embraces you guys, but seems to bring so much to the table on that front too. It's an awesome place.
You got a great mix of food down here, just with obviously being so close to Mexico. And down here in the Southwest, it's it's a real centerpiece of our day-to-day life, and it spills over into the food. But now the chimneys, I'll tell you, the big chimneys, they're a little aggressive. The mini chimneys, you get mini chimneys for an appetizer. Those they're like almost like 2 bite-sized. You can, 1 big bite size, or 2, you can break it up into 2. Those are great. And Baja Cafe, the huevos rancheros at the Baja Cafe may be the best I've ever seen.
Oh, wow. I'm a big fan of those. Wow.
Yeah, well, confirm, by the way, the mini chimneys made their way up to the booth, Dad, and those were real and spectacular. So, Coach, as usual, spot on.
Yeah. I hate to do this, but I guess we should talk some basketball. You guys are undefeated this year. What, 14-0? What makes this team so good right now?
Well, we got a great mix of veteran players, and we have 4 freshmen that are playing a lot, 4 in our top 8. Kind of going back old school a little bit, but I just think that it's just one of those teams where the pieces fit together, and obviously the players are talented, and we work really hard on our culture on a day-to-day basis. I mean, in this era of the transfer portal and NIL, everyone wants to focus on these other things, but I still think you find all your advantages in your connectivity in building a culture and in having willing participants in the culture. We don't want a culture of fear where I'm talking down to guys or forcing them to be within the team. We want a culture where people want to belong and want to be part of something bigger than themselves, and we work on that on a daily basis.
It certainly goes a long way, and that clearly has taken root there, and it allows your incredibly talented players to blossom. And one I know people were excited about when I was coming out there this fall and has delivered so far is Koa Pete, your freshman sensation. What's allowed him to come in and make such an impact right away for you guys?
Well, Koa obviously has some great genetics. Mike, I don't know, you probably played against his dad a little bit, or on the other side. I think you guys were you guys both offensive linemen, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So his dad is Todd Pete. Played for years in the NFL and with the Cardinals and the
I
Raiders.
played against him. Yeah, I was a defensive lineman. I actually played against him.
Okay. So that's his dad. So now Koa might move a little bit different than his dad, but they got great genetics, and they had 7 kids in the family. All 7 played Division I athletics. His brother Andrus is playing for the Steelers right now, and Koa brings that football physicality. With this elite athleticism and mobility, and just a crazy high IQ, great instincts, super versatile, and just honestly like 100th percentile character person. So it's been a joy to coach him, and all the success he has coming is going to be well deserved.
You mentioned you have a few freshmen in the rotation. How difficult is it to get that chemistry going with such a young team?
It wasn't any harder than anything else. These guys are high characters, and freshmen that play basketball at Arizona have usually been through the ringer a little bit. They've been challenged. They've been, they're amongst the best high school players in the country. So these guys came in and they were, not only talented, but they were physically ready and they were emotionally ready. And then, I got to give our vets a lot of credit. We have 4 vets that are playing a lot, and those guys have really left space in the room for those freshmen to be a big part of what we do and to grow and develop. And, that takes a sense of maturity when you have a few seniors on your team that are, that are understanding of those guys and what they're going through and helping them through it and welcoming them and understanding that they're a big part of what we do.
And you mentioned the gauntlet got one in front of them as you guys get really into conference play here. 6 other teams from the Big 12 inside the top 25 as of this week. What's made this conference such a powerhouse in basketball? What stands out maybe about the identity of the Big 12 that's given it this kind of depth?
Well, for us, it's only our second year in the Big 12. We were, in the Pac-12 for a lot of years and got really comfortable. So this has been great for us. I would just say that, you have a number of institutions that have invested in basketball, and you got some places that have really strong traditions and legacies in basketball, and they continue to invest in them. And you got great coaches. I mean, on a night in and night out basis. I mean, every coach you play. I mean, I jokingly say, that guy we're going against, that other coach, he lives in a big house too. I mean, these guys are they're elite. And then just elite talent, So, and then, when you look for an identity of a conference, I mean, the Big 12 is extremely physical, in a good way, and it's something that we've welcomed, and we're adapted to, and we feel it breeds for a great product. So it's great to be part of the Big 12, but. That being said, we know there's challenges on a night in and night out basis. And, when, we have Kansas State coming here tomorrow and watching them on film, you're like, oh man, we better get to it.
Do you set long range goals, or do the players like national champions ending up there, or is it all preceded by smaller goals?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think we work really hard on kind of our vision and our purpose, and it's something we talk about on a weekly basis, and what our vision is and what's our purpose. What are we playing for, and then what are we trying to accomplish? We spend a lot of time on that kind of stuff, and then we spend a lot of time on kind of what our identity is and what are the things we value. I mean, that's kind of the cornerstones to our culture build. And we spend a lot of time talking to them about them. And I think what you said is you want these big lofty goals. You do. You want to be looking ahead to something, but you have to be able to take realistic steps, to achieve those, and understanding that, one of your goals needs to be being tough, because you're going to have some ups and downs over the course of the season, and you're going to have some disappointment, and you got to be able to bounce back from things like that.
No question. And your program has displayed that resiliency so far. You guys have been a tournament team every year so far, and now going into your 5th season, trying to get through and past the Sweet 16 and maybe lift that trophy this year, cut down some nets. The goal for everyone there, we talked a little bit about, having fun with the food scene there in Tucson, but now in your 5th season there, how much has the support that you guys have gotten locally helped you in building this program the way you want to?
Well, a ton. I've inherited an amazing legacy, and I'm the keeper of the gate today. But Arizona basketball is much bigger than me, and there's going to be another successful coach after me, and so I'm really appreciative of the foundation this program has, and going back to, Lute Olson obviously is the icon, and, what he accomplished with this program and what he means to this community has really, gave us an amazing foundation. Like I tell people, like Arizona basketball, the bones of this program are strong. And so I'm fortunate to have, to be able to, the head coach here today, and the community. It's generational, and you guys know some of these, there's these programs across the country where they've had sustained success over such a long period of time that your support's really generational. Like Arizona basketball is a family thing and it's a community thing. And people have experiences, multi-generational with their family, with our program, and our program is something that brings people together in this community. And that's something that I think is really important. And that's honestly a driving force for me. I want to be successful here, not for me. I'm fine. I'll be fine. I'm living a good life and I'm appreciative of everything I got. I want this for the community, and the community deserves it and they want it. And we're going to do everything we can to deliver as much success as we can for them.
Well, off to a great start in delivering on that so far. Coach, congratulations on all the success to begin this season. Good luck down the home stretch here. We'll have to break bread with some Sonoran dogs next time we're in town. We appreciate it.
Would love to do it.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate your time there. Really a delicious food town there. So thanks to Tommy Lloyd, one of the best basketball coaches in college basketball. Got that team rocking and rolling right now. Because we can't go more than 15 minutes without something happening in the NFL. Our latest bit of news here breaking around the National Football League. Unsurprising given what we saw happen this season with play calling for the Lions, but they've officially parted way with their offensive coordinator, John Morton, who took over this season for Ben Johnson, who left to take the Bears head coaching job. And then midway through the season, Dan Campbell took over offensive play calling for this team. So you figured there might be changes made coming off a season where the Lions missed the postseason. And this, given what I just mentioned, was probably a likely place to start.
Yeah, and now he was a guy who was with the Detroit as an offensive analyst in 22, 23, 24 as a passing game coordinator in Denver, and then came back. They brought him back when Ben Johnson left because of his familiarity with the offense. And starting out the year, now the first game wasn't great. They scored 13 points, but then they scored 52, 38, 34, 37. They were actually ahead of the Ben Johnson pace early on. But then it fell off. Inconsistencies happened on the offense. That's when Dan Campbell took over play calling. So you're right. Kind of like when Dan Quinn took over defensive play calling from Joe Witt. You thought the writing was on the wall, and it was, as Joe Witt was relieved of his duties as well, that John Morton would not have a long future with the Detroit Lions.
I also apologize for wasting everyone's time on that. No disrespect, Dad, but bigger news, and maybe we'll go to break and put a pin in this and come back on the other side at some point, because courtesy of Adam Schefter over at ESPN, breaking news, reports say John Harbaugh out as the Ravens head coach in Baltimore after they missed the postseason. So we asked the question earlier in the show, would there be another job vacated in this cycle? The Ravens were certainly one when we thought potentially this might happen, but now we do get the news from Adam Schefter that John Harbaugh is out. We're going to take a quick break and get ourselves in order after that, and come up next, reacting more to that news and taking a look back at some of the bold predictions that we made before this NFL season next year on Gold. Breaking news again here, courtesy of Adam Schefter, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. with you, as The Baltimore Ravens have announced they are parting ways with longtime head coach John Harbaugh. The Ravens, as we know, missed the playoffs, losing their AFC North Championship matchup to the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football. John Harbaugh leaves Baltimore after 18 seasons at the helm, took over the Ravens in 2008, finished with a record of 180 and 113, reached the playoffs 12 times, reached the AFC title game 4 times, and won the Super Bowl back in 2012. He leaves the winningest coach in franchise history by 100 victories. But, Dad, we know this year, the end of the season, clouded certainly by injury, reports about the nature of the relationship between Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh. Your gut reaction now to this news that we knew was a possibility but never thought would actually happen?
Well, again, this is the Andy Reid in Philadelphia syndrome, right? That's what we kind of talked about with Mike Tomlin as well, that you get him to a certain point. Andy Reid, a bunch of NFC championships, one Super Bowl that they lost, but losing in the NFC championship game, and the thought, let's move on and have somebody get us over the hump. And by the way, they did get over the hump. Been to the Super Bowl a couple of times with a Super Bowl victory. So, because my initial thought is, who are you going to get? And I would have thought the same way with Andy Reid leaving Philadelphia. It's like, who are you going to get? But, they did get a Super Bowl championship after, years after letting Andy go. But still, they got one. So where are you going to go? Is this a complete wipeout of the staff? Todd Monken, the old coordinator, has been a head coach in college from 13 to 15 at Southern Miss. The assistant head coach, Willie Taggart, has an extensive head coaching resume in college at Kentucky, South Florida, Oregon, FSU, FAU, but not in the NFL. So I have a feeling, Mike, that they're going to just clean house and completely start over and say, okay, we need a staff here to kind of get us over the hump. But I really think it could also turn into be careful what you wish for.
It's a wild situation because instantly John Harbaugh becomes the number one head coaching candidate in this cycle, and instantly the Baltimore Ravens become far and away the number one job opening in this hiring cycle by nature of having the two. Like, if these had been individual jobs and candidacies in their own right, we'd say, oh yeah, no question, the Baltimore Ravens are going to hire John Harbaugh to come and coach this team. And instead they'll be looking forward now. And I do really think this boils down to, Dad, the way they view. We'll find out, and I'm sure there'll be stories written in retrospect about the nature of the relationship between Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson, who, again, was his second first-round draft pick the year Lamar was taken at the end of the first round, brought in at the end of Joe Flacco's time in Baltimore there, and that transition ultimately led to multiple MVPs, multiple forays into the playoffs, but the Super Bowl eluded them, and it's the same thing we talked about now with the pressure mounting in places like Buffalo with Sean McDermott, who, hey, if they lose early in this postseason run to a red-hot Jacksonville team, you have no idea what they'll do. Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor, like, when you've got one of the true difference makers at quarterback in their prime window, I'm sure for an organization that loves John Harbaugh a whole lot, they feel like, hey, if it's got to be one of the two in the names of trying to maximize our window, we're keeping the quarterback that's comparatively harder to find.
Mike, don't you think this is a situation where there is no Ben Johnson out there, right? That hot offensive or defensive coordinators. In fact, there's more defensive coordinators being talked about than offensive coordinators. This, to me, has Kevin Stefanski written all over it, right? Offensive-minded coach, 43 years old, has a built-in quarterback in Lamar Jackson, where he went through a bunch in Cleveland, which isn't all his doing. Obviously, management picks quarterbacks, though none have worked out. Some has to go on Stefanski and that. But I'm trying to think of who's that. And I think they'll go offense because, remember, John Harbaugh is known as a special teams guy, always had an O coordinator, a D coordinator. Now you bring in an offensive-minded head coach to work with Lamar Jackson and that offense because, like I said, I'm trying to think of a offensive-minded coordinator, maybe Clint Kubiak, possibly, but you have a veteran team ready to win. I don't know if you want a first-time head coach coaching them.
The other name that popped into my mind, because, and it's not like you have to do this. This isn't like the early 2000s Trojans trying to chase any remnants of the Pete Carroll era, but Jesse Minter was there. Like, he spent his time going back and forth between the Harbaughs early in his career, and now is primed leading one of the better defenses in the National Football League to be a head coach this cycle. So do you bring him back, revamp the defense, and then bring in, any number of the coordinators that could be on the market? We talked about Cliff Kingsbury getting fired. Brian Daboll's out there right now and may or may not be a head coach. Try and pair that with a guy in Minter who would come in and you'd hope instantly bring that defense back to the standard that's so often defined that. But it is hard to ignore the fact that the Lamar Jackson of it all is probably going to define this decision-making process for them. So,
I definitely think it's going to be an offensive-minded coach this time around, and I think Stefanski will be one of the top names that'll be associated with it.
Going to be fascinating to watch that and how that goes down now. So again, Lamar Jackson now going to be dealing with a new head coach for the first time in his career, is John Harbaugh, out in Baltimore after 18 seasons. So this is going to be fascinating here. Dad, I guess from the other side of this, now for John Harbaugh, we just talked about the Baltimore Ravens side of this, but for John Harbaugh, we said the New York Giants, probably the best job on the table the way we view it right now. Is that your leader in the clubhouse for landing him at this point?
Yeah, I think so. Again, you have a guy who's so well respected. You have a team that has a quarterback. Now, the thought may be to go to a young guy to work with a young quarterback. That's the only reason I would think maybe not a John Harbaugh, but he's so well respected. And, maybe it was just that too long of a tenure where, as I'd mentioned before, the late, great Marty Schottenheimer used to say, after 10, 11 years, players start looking past you in the locker room. We know Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh at 19 and 18 years are the most tenured coaches in the league. I got to believe Harbaugh wants to keep coaching. And I would say the Giants would be one of the top guys on their list, again, because we just don't have that coordinator out there offensively or defensively like Ben Johnson that everybody is just clamoring for.
So I'd say this, and again, we talked about the comparisons between what you got from Cam Ward this year and what you got from Drake Maye last year. If you're looking for the exact carbon copy you could try and find of how last year's Patriots became this year's Patriots, Tennessee, get him in the building and don't let him leave, man. Like, it's the same thing we talked about, a guy in Mike Vrabel who had the Titans consistently competing outside of their weight class. Now with John Harbaugh, a similar culture builder who'd come in right away and try and reset that foundation around your rookie quarterback. So going to be fascinating to watch this on both sides. Harbaugh, 18 years now, full-grown adult lifetime, out as the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, sending shockwaves through this process here. We'll obviously have much more for you that as we get ready for tomorrow, but in the meantime, let's finish up with Fourth and Golic here as we look ahead at a couple of stories to finish off your day. One of them, as we start off Fourth and Golic here, Dad, the day and age we're in right now with the transfer portal, Tulsa decided to take it to the next level. The Tulsa Football Portal House, where for a second I thought that was a stripper pole and got really worried. That's a microphone stand and nothing bad's going on. But they basically had all their coaches in all these different rooms bringing players on their visits through the Portal House in Tulsa. Where are you at on this as a recruiting strategy?
Listen, we have seen colleges go through unbelievable facilities. Well, that's maybe not a big thing anymore once NIL started, but everybody's looking for an eye catcher, right? Something that's kind of cool for these, because they're still adults, young adults, still trying to be impressed. So hey, why not? You got to try something to separate yourself, right?
See, you got a little putt-putt there in the backyard. You go out there, and if you got multiple guys, you put them there, see how the competitive juices flow. Strategy, get your quarterback on the giant chessboard here. It's all couched as fluff, but really could be ways to try and drill down on who's going to be right for their football team. Awesome stuff there. Not as awesome as this, though. We talked yesterday about Trevor Lawrence and the Good Vibes Jags getting his grill at the end of the game this last week. We had video of a fan at a bar in Jacksonville asking and being allowed to squat Trevor Lawrence. And Dad, you and I have both been around him. The guy's gigantic, so pulling off the logistics of this is insane. But the Jags roll into the postseason. Shout out to our old teammate Emerson Latzia, truly feeling like America's team right now.
Without question. Liam Cohen and that relationship with Trevor Lawrence, incredible. Those squats, though, boy, the back on that person looks like it's going to be a little hurting after those squats.
I get the guy's like the size of a condor. He's massive. So even to be able to get him up onto the back, I'm counting that as a win. We'll be back here tomorrow, hopefully stacking more wins right here on Golic and Golic. Thanks for watching. For more Golic and Golic clips, make sure you subscribe to the FanDuel Sports Network YouTube channel.